I used to think success would feel like freedom. Like walking into an expensive hotel lobby and realizing, for once, you belong there. Turns out, mine came with a parking space and a leash I didn't notice until it was already around my neck. And I'm 27, working as an executive assistant in this sleek London investment firm, the kind of place where even the air smells like money. Everyone walks fast, talks faster, and lives on oat lattes and adrenaline. My boss Mark is 44, married. Charismatic in that polished, I could sell morality to the devil kind of way. People orbit around him. The interns quote him like he's some kind of prophet. And me? I was just grateful to be in the same orbit. I was the girl who double-checked his flights, remembered his wife's birthday, and stayed late because you're the only one I trust with this. Classic me, mistaking attention for respect. When I first joined, I earned barely enough to cover rent and my pre-lunches. Then Mark started noticing me. Or that's what I thought. He'd compliment my work ethic, drop off gifts on my desk. A new pen, noise-canceling headphones, a bottle of wine with a note that said, "For the nights you actually go home." It all felt harmless, even sweet. When I tried to protest, he'd laugh and tell me, "Don't be so sensitive. You've earned a little appreciation." NNTHAT line stuck. Don't be so sensitive. He used it whenever I hesitated. Like it was my fault for reading too much into his gestures. Like discomfort meant ingratitude. NNTHE office worshipped him. He had this way of making people believe they mattered. Like being in his good graces was a golden ticket. And for a while, I believed it too. I worked late, canceled weekends, covered for his family emergencies that always coincidentally aligned with client retreats. My phone became an extension of his. Notifications from him were constant. Time zones, schedules, reminders. I told myself it was mentorship, but really, it was surveillance dressed up as responsibility. NNTHE first big gift came after a brutal quarter. We'd pulled off an impossible deal. He took me to dinner at this Michelin star restaurant I couldn't have afforded, even if I skipped rent. He toasted to teamwork and said he couldn't have done it without me. There was a small blue box on the table. Inside, a bracelet. Tiffany. He said it matched my energy. I laughed awkwardly. Because, what do you say to that? It was easier to pretend it was professional gratitude than to admit how wrong it felt. NNTHAT night, when I got home, I left the bracelet on the counter. The metal was cold, heavier than I expected. I remember staring at it, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But the next morning, he noticed I wasn't wearing it. He smirked and said, "You're hard to impress." I smiled back, pretending it was a joke. Inside, something small and quiet cracked. It got worse after that. Every success turned into a performance. He'd hand me gifts in front of people, call me his right hand, his indispensable one. The attention made me uncomfortable, but also proud. I hate admitting that part, because I know what it looks like, some girl enjoying the perks. But it wasn't like that. It was confusion wrapped in flattery. I didn't realize then that every compliment was a string, and soon, there'd be too many to untangle. Then came the IPO, the long nights, the constant tension, the way everyone looked half dead by the end. When it finally happened, success, millions raised, champagne everywhere. I thought maybe, finally, this was it. I'd made it. I'd earned it. NNBUT. I didn't know that my reward was waiting in the parking lot with a red ribbon and a smile that looked like approval, until it didn't. The day he gave me the Bentley felt like a movie. Not the good kind. More like one of those glossy nightmares that look perfect, until you start noticing what's off in the frame. It was the morning after the IPO celebration. I'd barely slept, my head still buzzing from champagne and exhaustion. The office was electric. Everyone was hungover on success. Mark called me down to the lobby, said he had something special. I remember the sound of my heels on the marble floor, the way the receptionist gave me that knowing smirk people have when they think you're the favorite. And outside, parked right at the front, was a silver Bentley Continental GT. A red ribbon stretched across the hood, like something out of a luxury ad. For a second, I thought it was for a client. But then he dangled the keys in front of me and said it was mine. For everything you've done, you deserve to be seen arriving in something that reflects your worth. Everyone clapped. I froze. My palms were slick, my face burning. I laughed because what else do you do when your boss hands you a car that costs more than your apartment building? NHE hugged me for the cameras, too close, too long, and whispered something about loyalty being priceless. The flash from someone's phone caught that moment. I saw it later on our company's Slack channel, captioned, "Our boss knows how to reward hard work." I wanted to crawl under my desk. Driving it home that night felt unreal. The leather smelled like money and control. The dashboard screen glowed with this soft gold hue. Everything about it screamed ownership. Just not mine. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I should just enjoy it. People would kill for this kind of recognition. NNBUT. The first red flag came fast. And then when I started the GPS to set my route home, there was already a destination saved under home. Not my flat, his villa. 2 hours outside London. I figured it was a glitch. Maybe the system was used before me. Maybe it hadn't been reset. I tried deleting it. No option to remove. Weird, but fine. I switched to Google Maps instead. NNTHE next morning. Mark mentioned that I must have gotten home late. He said he hoped the drive wasn't too rough. The thing is, I hadn't told anyone when I left. I hadn't posted. No one should have known. Something twisted in my stomach. Over the next few days, the coincidences stacked up. He'd comment on small things. What route I took, which cafe I stopped by on the way to work, even when I left the office earlier than usual. I'd laugh it off, say he had good instincts. But deep down, I felt watched. NNTHE final straw came one Friday. I was heading home after grabbing dinner with a friend. The GPS glitched again, rerouting me back toward that villa. I remember the way my chest tightened, how my fingers gripped the steering wheel until they hurt. It wasn't random. It was programmed. I sat in my driveway for a long time that night, staring at the screen's reflection in the windshield. Home. Colin's residence. My hands were shaking. I couldn't even get out of the car. The air inside felt heavy, like someone else was sitting in the passenger seat, watching me breathe. NNTHAT was when the realization hit. This wasn't a gift. It was a tracking device with leather seats, and I barely slept. I kept replaying every kind gesture, every expensive present, every time he told me I was part of the family. How many times had I mistaken manipulation for mentorship? NNWA's I building a career, or just digging my own cage. The next morning I woke up before sunrise. I hadn't really slept. My apartment felt smaller than usual, like the walls had shifted closer during the night. The Bentley keys were still on the kitchen counter, glinting under the dim light. I stared at them for a full minute before picking them up. They felt heavy, like they knew something I didn't, and I drove to work, pretending everything was normal. The city was half asleep, fog still clinging to the bridges. My hands were locked on the wheel the whole way, knuckles pale against the black leather. Every time the GPS screen flickered, I felt a jolt in my chest. I told myself I was being dramatic. But then again, paranoia usually starts with a reason. When I got to the office, Mark was already there. Of course he was. He always showed up like he'd been waiting. He smiled that CEO smile, warm, rehearsed, expensive, and asked if I was enjoying the car. I muttered something about still getting used to it. He laughed and said I should trust it more. It knows the way better than most people. And MY's stomach dropped. It was one of those moments where everything inside you goes still. Like your brain stops buffering for a second because it can't handle the data. I smiled, nodded, walked away. But the second I sat down at my desk, my heart was pounding so hard I thought someone might hear it. NNTHE rest of the day was a blur. I tried focusing on emails, presentations, scheduling, the usual noise, but every notification from him made me jump. Around noon, I checked the Bentley app on my phone. I hadn't even realized it was connected to me. There it was, a full list of trip history, every single drive, and every stop, and every timestamp. And under vehicle owner, M. Collins corporate account, NNMY throat went dry. It wasn't my car. It never had been. It was a company asset, and I was the data. NNTHE next part still plays in my head like a movie I can't pause. That night, I sat on my couch with my laptop open, scrolling through the routes. I could see every place I'd been. My home, my gym, my friend's flat. Even that tiny clinic I'd gone to a week ago, the one I hadn't told anyone about. NNHE knew everything. NNTHE realization made my whole body tense. My jaw locked, shoulders rigid. I felt sick, like I'd swallowed static. I kept refreshing the page as if it would change. It didn't. The last entry was still there. The one that showed my car had been routed to his villa NNNOT by accident. On purpose. I couldn't even cry. My mind was already shifting into survival mode. Years of being the good employee had trained me to stay composed, to think before reacting. So that's what I did. I thought, and then I opened a new folder on my desktop and started saving screenshots. Every log, every route, every timestamp. I recorded a screen video of the GPS auto-filling his address when I turned the ignition on. My hands were shaking so bad I had to redo it twice. The hum of the fridge was the only sound in the apartment. At one point, I caught my reflection in the window. Eyes wide, hair a mess, lips pale. I didn't recognize myself. I looked like someone caught trespassing in her own life. When I finally shut the laptop, it was past 2 a.m. The city outside was quiet. I sat there in the dark and thought about every time he'd called me loyal, every gift, every smile that felt like validation. And all I could think was, I'd let him build a GPS right into my trust. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. That's the thing about people like me. We learn to smile through the wreckage. My face knew how to lie better than my mouth did. I greeted everyone, made coffee, handed Mark his itinerary, even laughed at his stupid joke about investors being like toddlers with credit cards. Inside, I was on autopilot. NNTHE whole day felt off. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the hum of the printers too loud. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. I kept telling myself I just needed proof. Real, irrefutable proof. The kind that doesn't get brushed off as paranoia or misunderstanding. NNBY noon. I had it. And I called a friend from uni. She's a paralegal now, the kind of person who knows how to handle things quietly. I didn't even tell her the whole story at first. Just said, if someone was tracking you through a company car, what would you do? She paused and said, you mean illegally tracking? I didn't answer. She sighed and told me to document everything. Screenshots, timestamps, internal emails if possible. Then she said, don't confront him. Not yet. NTHAT part was hard. Because every cell in my body wanted to scream. But screaming never works when the other person holds the microphone. NNSOI played along. For a week, I smiled at his compliments, said thank you when he called me loyal, even wore the bracelet he'd given me months ago, the one that suddenly felt like handcuffs. I acted grateful, small, predictable, and all the while I was building my escape plan. Late at night, I sat in my kitchen, piecing everything together into one neat digital package. Screenshots of the GPS history, proof of company ownership, internal messages about the gift. I even included the moment he'd said it was an investment in my comfort. I read that line over and over until the words lost all meaning. NNTHE folder's name was simple. Truth. NNBY the end of the week. I was ready. Coincidentally, or maybe fatefully, it was the same day as the annual company meeting. The one where Mark always gave his big "We're a family" speech. The irony was almost poetic. NNTHE auditorium was full. Fancy lighting, background music, everyone in business casual pretending to be a family that didn't eat its own. I sat near the front, laptop bag at my feet. My palms were sweating so much I had to wipe them on my skirt. My heart wasn't just racing, it was trying to climb out of my chest. When Mark walked on stage, the room lit up with polite applause. He started his usual speech about trust, growth, and teamwork. His voice was smooth, calculated. When he got to the recognition part, I knew what was coming. NNHE called my name, and he stood, forcing a smile. The crowd turned. Mark spread his arms like some benevolent king and said, "This is Alice, the most loyal, hardworking person in this company. She's the reason we made it through this year." People clapped, cameras flashed, and I could have stayed quiet. I could have kept the mask on. But I'd spent too long being the good soldier. NNSO. I took a breath, walked up, and plugged my laptop into the projector. NNTHE screen behind him lit up. Not with the company logo, but with a map. Dozens of red lines showing every route I'd driven. Every stop. Every date. And right at the top, in bold, vehicle owner, M. Collins corporate account, NNTHE room, went silent. I could hear the air conditioner whirring, someone's pen rolling off a desk. Mark froze. He turned toward me, his face pale but still trying to smile. NHE muttered something about security measures and miscommunication. I didn't look at him. I just said, I hope the board finds that explanation convincing. Then I unplugged the laptop and walked off stage. My hands were shaking, but my spine had never felt straighter. The aftermath felt nothing like victory. People always imagine justice as this cinematic moment, standing tall while your oppressor crumbles, the crowd gasping, truth ringing in the air like church bells. In reality, it was dead quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder if you've just ruined your own life. NNN01 spoke to me after I left the stage. No one looked me in the eye. I sat at my desk until HR called me in. They asked for my statement. I gave them everything, the screenshots, the logs, the car registration. The head of HR nodded the whole time but kept glancing at the clock, like she couldn't wait for the meeting to be over. And Mark didn't come in that day, or the next. The whispers started fast. Administrative leave, internal review, confidential investigation. A week later, the official email went out. CEO, temporarily stepping down pending inquiry. Corporate poetry for he's in trouble, but we're not saying why. NNMY lawyer friend helped me negotiate my exit. We called it a mutual separation, which is HR's way of saying, we'll pay you to disappear. I took the settlement. I told myself it was closure. NNBUT closure doesn't come in wire transfers. It comes in quiet moments, like sitting in my apartment a week later, staring at the spot on the counter where those car keys used to be. The same counter where I'd once laid down that Tiffany bracelet. Same spot. Same cold metal, different kind of ownership. An NTHE article hit Bloomberg a few weeks later. Investment firm CEO under investigation for employee privacy breach. My name wasn't in it, thank God. But people knew. They always do. And then I deleted social media for a while. Every ping of my phone made me flinch. Every email subject line with press inquiry made my stomach twist. I couldn't even ride in an Uber without checking the map twice. Paranoia doesn't vanish just because the threat does. NNBUT slowly, painfully. I started breathing again, and I sold most of the stuff I'd bought during those years. The designer shoes, the tailored coats, the things that had made me feel like I belonged in that world. I realized none of it was mine. It was all part of the illusion. The luxury wrapping paper on a story that was never really about success. It was about control. Now I take the tube to work. I found a job at a smaller firm, quieter, less glamorous, no champagne Fridays or rooftop parties. My desk faces a window that overlooks a grimy alley, and you know what? I love it. I love that no one tracks my calendar, that the most expensive thing in my office is a dying fern. Sometimes, when a silver Bentley drives by, I feel that familiar chill crawl up my spine. I don't look. I don't need to. The reflection on the glass is enough to remind me. I was never given a gift. I was handed a leash and told to call it gratitude. Looking back, I don't even hate him. That's the strange part. Hatred would make him matter too much. What I feel now is quieter, the kind of disgust that's more like pity. Because people like him think they're gods, but really, they're just scared little boys trying to own the things that make them feel powerful. Still, there's a part of me that wonders, if I hadn't checked the GPS that night, if I just smiled and kept pretending everything was fine, would I still be in that office, wearing the bracelet, driving the car, convincing myself I was lucky? Because sometimes the scariest part of being trapped isn't realizing you're in a cage. It's realizing how long you called it home. NNSO, here's my question for you.